flowers. I think it's time for a May TBR. Yeah, let's do this. So last year I tried something new. I knew last year when I tried this, being so small and being relatively new, that people weren't going to jump on. This wasn't going to take off like blazes. I think I had about, across 3 platforms, Discord, BookTube, and Bookstagram, I think I had about 45 people participate, which is awesome. It's so cool. And now you're like, in what? You will remember, perhaps, if you've been here for at least a year, that I launched Mary Shelley May back in May of last year. It's just what it says. As they say in England, it's just what it says on the tin. It is a month dedicated to reading things about Mary Shelley. Now, I am an over planner. I love planning. And so last year I put out this gigantic bingo board and I've gone real low key this year, really low key. So let's just talk about what my plans are, what my hopes are, and what each of the prompts is. I did post a little, know me, just info. I think it's like a 1.5 minute long announcement that it was coming. But here is my Mary Shelley May potential TBR, and also your invitation to please join me and also invite your friends if they're interested in reading about the life of Mary Shelley. I've really streamlined it down. There are 5 prompts this year with 3 bonuses. The first thing that I want to mention is the group read. So the group read, and a definite I will read this, for Mary Shelley May 2023 is The Last Man by Mary Shelley. This is a book. It's one of the 2 books that was still in publication by Mary Shelley when I first read Frankenstein. So whether you know it or not, until the 1980s, almost all of Mary Shelley's work had gone out of print. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But when I first found Frankenstein and loved it as a teen, the only other book that I could find was The Last Man. And I tried to read this several times, but it's apocalyptic dystopian. And I was more of a Pride and Prejudice kind of teen. So I actually have not read this. I am so familiar with it. I've spoken about it and I've included it in papers on Mary Shelley, but I have never actually read this start to finish, cover to cover, for enjoyment, never. So the basic premise of this is that it's the 21st century, or you heard that right, it's the 21st century. We had a little snafu with the camera. Perhaps it's not the same angle it was before, I'm not sure, but we're all put to rights now, so let's go back to the Mary Shelley. So Last Man, it's the 21st century. That's where we were. It's the 21st century and the world is ending. This is apocalyptic, dystopian science fiction. I mean, by Mary Shelley. I believe she wrote it in 1822. And she's writing about the 21st century. So I'm really excited to host this. This is the only book that we will have discussions for, reading breakdowns. I'll break it down. I think I can break it by chapter. Mary Shelley's chapters, not for the faint of heart, quite long. Okay, no, she doesn't have chapters in this. She has volumes. So we'll break it down somehow. I'll figure all that out and let you know. I don't necessarily want to do it volume by volume because they look quite large. We'll figure it out. But there will be maybe page numbers. Not everybody will read from the Everyman's edition. There will be a breakdown. There will be channels for each of the, are they called channels? I hardly use Discord. But there will be breakdowns within the Discord, and there is a Discord for Mary Shelley May. I made it last year. I had space for every category that people could be talking about, including the crafty ones, and all of that will go away. All of that will go away, and there will just be a space to talk about The Last Man and spaces for people, like a general space, which will be spoiler free. And then there will be a place where people can discuss each of the chunks of the book, where we can use spoilers. I'll be active on there. The reading will go, I'll try to make it last the entire month so you can go slow with it. And I will be reading it along with you for the first time, in essence. Although I'm very familiar with it and many of the passages in it. Obviously, I've never read it because I didn't know if it had chapters or what. So, yeah, that is how this will go. I'm really looking forward to it. Come, read the group read with me. And I might do a video review of that one. And if I choose to do that, it really depends on time and my work schedule. But if I choose to do that, I kind of have a vision for asking for your thoughts to be included, to be quoted in that video as well. But we'll see how that goes. Prompt 1, group read, The Last Man. Prompt 2 is to read a short story by Mary Shelley. Yes, she wrote short stories. She wrote a lot of short stories. She wrote short essays as well. There is a bunch of them in this little book here called the Mary Shelley Reader. This also includes Frankenstein, Matilda, some reviews of books, mostly books by her father and Percy, her husband, and some letters. I picked this up for $3, used, and just happened to find it. And went, okay, it's got short stories in it. And it does. It has about, I think, 8 of her short stories in it. But if you don't want to spend a dime, Project Gutenberg has so many of her short stories. If you just search for Mary Shelley, all sorts of things come up. And among them is a collected works of her short stories. So that could be a place to go. There are also published collections you can find on Amazon or Abe Books, Thrift Books. Better World Books doesn't have a whole lot of Mary Shelley beyond Frankenstein. I did get my copy of The Last Man on there. I had another copy, but the writing was so small that I went, no, I need a new copy. And so I got The Last Man from Better World Books. But you can definitely find collections of her short stories, her essays, most places. I suggest going for a used copy somewhere. But if you don't want to spend a dime, Project Gutenberg. Yay. Next. So that was the second prompt, read a short story by Mary Shelley. The third prompt is to read a contemporary author of Mary Shelley. And I have 3 possibilities for myself here. My first possibility is to read The Scottish Chiefs by Jane Porter. I read this maybe 4 years ago, a while ago, and I absolutely loved it. And I then, at the end of last year, read Sister Novelists, the trailblazing Porter sisters who paved the way for Austen and the Brontes, and got so obsessed with the Porter sisters. Porter. So when I read this not having any idea who this woman was who wrote it. And now I'm excited to read it knowing how much of their lives, how much of the people they knew, they worked into their stories. So I very well might choose to reread The Scottish Chiefs. Also, my edition, which I got from Better World Books. I remember being so excited because it's got these gorgeous, gorgeous color illustrations. It's just the best little book, and I never purchased anything on Better World Books for more than $6. So I know it was less than $6. Coming in strong with the Better World Books game. So that's one possibility for read a contemporary. Then I've got Jane Loudon's A Tale of the 22nd Century. This is The Mummy. And it was written in 1821. So 1818 is when Frankenstein was first published. And then the Napoleonic Wars take place. They drive this desire for things Egyptian. And they drive this desire for Egyptian culture. People were doing terrible things with the mummified remains of human beings. But we are all familiar with the movie franchise, The Mummy, and stories about mummies. And Jane Loudon got real excited about it and wrote A Tale of the 22nd century. So where Last Man is going to take us into the 21st century from an 1820s perspective, Jane Loudon's going to take us into the 22nd century with an 1820s perspective, and I would love to read this. I've had this on my shelf for such a long time. I first got this for my 200 Women project in 2019, and didn't actually get around to reading it, or I replaced it with something else. And then I have put it on different TBRs over the last couple of years and have just never picked it up. And I think that Mary Shelley May would be the perfect time to do it. We'll see. I also have one more very tempting possibility, and that is to read Lady Caroline Lamb's first work of fiction, which she wrote the year her family was trying to get her declared insane because of her romance with Lord Byron. Right there. She wrote Glenarvan, and I think they renamed it in the 1980s, The Passionate Pursuit or something like that. But the original title was Glenarvan, and this was written in 1816, published in 1816, and which is 2 years before Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. And if you don't know the connection between Mary Shelley and Lord Byron and Lady Caroline Lamb, what are you doing? Go Google search. I'll wait. Fascinating, right? So, this is Glenarvan, Lady Caroline Lamb's thinly veiled, true account, firsthand account. Percy Bysshe Shelley, Lord Byron, her life, her romance. She was a married woman, her family members. Yeah, Lady Caroline Lamb, she's going to come up again in this TBR. But those are my three options for contemporaries of Mary Shelley. And there are so many. You could read Jane Austen. Jane Austen was a contemporary of Mary Shelley. You could read the Brontes. The Brontes were a contemporary of Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley's life spans quite a long time. So you can read anything. In fact, it's 1787 to 1851. 1787 to 1851. So anyone who lived during that time and published a book, you can read it. Dickens. You can read anything, really. There's so many contemporaries of Mary Shelley. But those are the three that are interesting to me right now. You could also read Byron or Shelley. You could read journals. You could read a book by her father. You could read all sorts of things. You are not limited to weird, obscure things like I am currently showing you. But those are the things that are interesting to me. Then for the fourth prompt, it is to read a biography of a woman who lived between 1787 and 1851. That's the lifespan of Mary Shelley. So you could absolutely read a biography of Mary Shelley if you have never read a biography of Mary Shelley, or even if you have, you could still read one of Mary Shelley, or you could branch out like I intend to do. I have 5 possibilities. So one of my possibilities is the book that I was so excited that I just could not show you, and that is The Sister Novelists. These two are contemporaries of Mary Shelley. I have already read this, and then earlier this month, this is still April when I'm recording this, so earlier this month, I got to see a live interview. New York Public Library streamed a live interview with her, with Devaney Lucer, and I am just really wanting to reread this. When I first read it, I listened to it on audio, and I knew as soon as I was finished that I needed to get a physical copy of it because there's just so much information in it that I could use for other things. There's so much. It's so long. And it's not boring at all. It reads like a novel. There's just so much in it that I would like to reread. So even though I read this at the end of the year last year, and it's just going to be May. I very well may pick this up as a biography of a woman who lived during Mary Shelley's lifetime. But I also have had a hankering to reread this. These are the journals of Dorothy Wordsworth, so William's sister. And William and Dorothy lived together for most of their adult life. And she kept house for him, and she never married. And she keeps a journal. And the journal is just a delight. I hate the way that it's described on the back as like her journals, which are in themselves works of art, poetic and beautiful, simple and straightforward, capturing these vivid moments of life in very simple ways. And they're like, yeah, it can teach us a lot about Wordsworth. William, not Dorothy. So Dorothy Wordsworth. Would love to reread her journals. This is called the Grasmere and Alfoxden journals. Grasmere and Alfoxden are places that they were written. So that's a possibility. I could reread those, or maybe just dip in and out of them. There is a biography of Dorothy Wordsworth that I don't have, that my library doesn't have, that I would like to get my hands on, but it's not going to happen right now. So maybe rereading the journal might be the thing. And then there is this book that haunts me because I have tried to read it so many times and I'm so fascinated by it and I don't know why. I just don't read it, but I don't. And that is Mad Mary Lamb by Susan Tyler Hitchcock. I want to read this book. I am prioritizing this book. I am reading this book this month. This is about the sister in the Lamb duo who wrote Shakespeare for kids, like retold Shakespeare's stories for children in the 1800s, among other things. They wrote other children's books and did other things. But it's her story, how she killed their mother. Yes, I figured we needed a silent pause. And I want to read this book, but I never do it. So, reading this book this month. Then, to circle back to our good friend Carolyn Lamb, I said that she'd be coming back. I can't get these stickers off, so forgive me, but I got Caro, The Fatal Passion. Now, there is this year coming out by Antonia Fraser, this amazing looking book, which is a brand new biography of Carolyn Lamb. Enter the 1970s. And I got this used off Better World Books. It was very cheap. I thought it had a dust jacket, but it doesn't. The dust jacket would have looked like this. So much prettier than this, but that's okay. I've already kind of dipped into this and realized that it is very dramatic. Very dramatic. So it's not going to be scholarly, but I'm still going to read it. I think it's going to be a very fast read. And I've actually never read a published, researched biography of Carolyn Lamb that has interested me for quite some time. So I will probably read that most definitely. I don't think that Carolyn Lamb and Mary Lamb were related, but I may find out differently. And then finally, I have Antonia Fraser. This is The Case of the Married Woman. I got this off of Better World Books as well, and I thought that I ordered a cover that looked like this. I think this is the American cover. I think I got a British copy. In fact, I know I did. I know I got a British copy because it says so right there, .co.uk. And probably in pounds? Yes, 25 pounds. So I got a British copy, which makes me super happy, but it looks very different. So if you're looking for this one, you're going to look for The Case of the Married Woman, Carolyn Norton, a 19th century heroine who wanted justice for women. This is about a woman who is mistreated in her marriage, I believe, and she tries to leave her husband, and the courts will not allow her custody of her children. And so she has the choice of either staying in an abusive relationship, which everyone in society seems to know is abusive, if I remember correctly, or losing her children. And she fights that whole system. And I don't know if she makes any changes, but I know she fights that whole system. And this is at a time, remember, when women and children were the... Lola, no, she's sniffing the camera. I don't know if you got to see her at all when I turned it, but she's right there. This is at a time when women and children were the property of the men in their lives. In essence, she's trying to set herself free, and she will have to leave her children behind. And she loves her children. She's a good mother. So I know all of this from other books that I've read at the time. In fact, I know a lot about this from the foreword in a book called Maurice by Mary Shelley. The foreword in that book is incredible, and it tells the story of Carolyn Norton, but it also tells the story of a friend of Mary Shelley's who goes through something very similar that she meets in Italy, a British woman that she meets in Italy. So I can't remember her name right now. But anyway, that's how I heard about Carolyn Norton. And then I realized Antonia Fraser had written a biography of her, and I got super excited. Those are my possibilities. To be honest, I love biographies, and I will probably end up reading all of them to the detriment of the other books on my TBR, but that's okay. I only have one book for the last prompt because it's the only one I'm going to read for the last prompt, but you could go a lot of ways with the last prompt. The last prompt, the fifth prompt, is read a book set in a city Mary Shelley lived in. And there are so many places. These people were on the run a lot of the time. And lived means lay your head down. So it could be a place she slept in once. Maybe don't pick a place where she ate lunch once. Pick a place where she slept once. But your options are vast and wide. So I picked London. I picked My Imaginary Mary. So it doesn't have to be a classic. It doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be silly. It doesn't have to have anything to do with Mary Shelley at all. The connection is just the location. But I've been wanting to get this on a TBR for a while. And so My Imaginary Mary, here we come. If you're not familiar with the Janes or the Marys series by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows, this is a YA alternate history fantasy series, which focuses on different the first trilogy, I believe, focused on 3 famous Janes, one per book. They don't have to be real people because Jane Eyre was one of them. I know I have that one. And then the Marys, for some reason, interest me a lot more. There's the Calamity Jane was another one from the Janes, but there's Mary Shelley, which is in this one. It's Mary Shelley and Ada Lovelace and a automaton or automaton, a robot, basically, an AI that Ada invents that they name Pan. You have to, their dedications always start with an apology. Suspend reality and historical accuracy to enjoy those, but it works for the prompt, and I'm gonna do it. It's also attached to Mary Shelley. There is the bonus, read or reread Frankenstein, which, to be perfectly honest, I'm not planning on doing. But really, you can make it fun and interesting for yourself if you've only ever read one particular version of Frankenstein, because they are quite different from printing to printing. What? Did you not know this? Maybe you did, and you're like, yes! And if you did know this, are you an 1818 superfan, or do you prefer the more heavily edited later editions? I am an 1818 superfan all the way. They are quite different from each other, and there's seriously interesting reasons why. If you've only ever read one version, seek out the other and have a read and compare and contrast, because they are, in places, vastly different. Then there is a fun, crafty bonus prompt, and that is to design a Mary Shelley May bookmark. I'm going to do this one. I am absolutely going to do this one, and I'm encouraging everyone to take a photograph of their bookmark and share it on Instagram with the hashtag Mary Shelley May. So if you design a bookmark, I really want to see it. Please, please, please. And end of May, when I do my wrap-up video for Mary Shelley May, or if I do a standalone review of The Last Man, I will share all of the Mary Shelley May bookmarks here. So please, please, please participate in that because I think it will be super fun. Even if you don't think you're artistic, it doesn't have to be artistic. It doesn't have to be handmade. You could make it on the computer. You could do all sorts of things. You could sew it. You could cross stitch it. You could paint it. You could cut it. You could collage it. Anything. Last year, I actually read this as a retelling of Frankenstein. This is Frankenstein, a Monstrous Parody by Ludvorspmonster, and I highly recommend it if you have never read it. It's quite cute and a little bit disturbing. But I bought a used copy of it, and it came with a cover, and the cover looked exactly like this. So I made bookmarks last year, actually, just by cutting out interesting bits and pieces of the old cover that this came with. That was already a little bit ripped when I got it. So I thought, you know what? I don't need the dust jacket. Let's turn it into something useful. Anything goes with the making of the bookmarks. I think it'll just be super fun and community building to do. Then also, maybe you're listening to an audiobook and you need something to do with your hands. Make a Mary Shelley bookmark. Then finally, the last prompt is to watch an adaptation of Frankenstein. Mary Shelley adjacent, I do have 2 books that I would like to read this month that I'm just going to count as 2 nonfiction reads, but they are Mary Shelley adjacent. They don't fit the prompts, but I still want to read them. So I mentioned earlier that until the 1980s, all but 2 of Mary Shelley's books were out of print. Did you know she wrote a lot? Not accessible until after the 1980s, thanks to the work of Barbara Johnson. So I have here a bind up, slim but powerful bind up of everything that Barbara Johnson ever wrote on Mary Shelley. And she was a scholar, and she kind of brought Mary Shelley back into the forefront of the literary world in the 1980s. They had really written her off and had made the very annoying assumption that she only made it big with Frankenstein because of who her husband was. Well, do you know how hard it is to find Percy Bysshe Shelley's poetry collections in print now? It's pretty hard. Do you know how easy it is to find Frankenstein? It's pretty easy. Which one stood the test of time? And then if you get your hands on other things that she wrote and published in her lifetime, they are quite compelling. Little bit disturbing, but so was Frankenstein. So here is all of the work that, including syllabuses for classes she taught and everything. Here is all of the work that Barbara Johnson did. It's very academic. I've looked through a few of the things. It's very academic, but I'm excited to read it and see what kinds of insights she was finding and presenting to the world that brought Mary Shelley the recognition that she deserved and kind of changed the way that the literary world viewed her. So excited about that. And then also very Mary Shelley adjacent, I have 2 journals by I have 1 journal by Mary Wollstonecraft and a memoir by her that her husband published after her death. So I have A Short Residence in Sweden by Mary Wollstonecraft, and I have Memoirs of the Author of the Rights of Women by William Godwin. Godwin is Mary Wollstonecraft's husband and Mary Shelley's father. Mary Wollstonecraft is Mary Shelley's mother. And I've never read this, so I'm really excited to read this. I have read The Vindication of the Rights of Women, but Mary Wollstonecraft isn't present in that. It's not about her. She is present. Don't come at me. She is present in it, and that she's writing very passionately about the rights of women, and she is, of course, a woman. But these are letters. This is different. I assume that her daughter would have read these to try and get to know her mother, because Mary Wollstonecraft died in childbirth. And so Mary Shelley never knew her mother. I imagine that these journals and these letters are the things that would have informed her of who her mother was as a person. So that is Mary Shelley May. If you are not interested in the rest of what I'm reading, see you later. Go plan your own TBRs. And please make sure to tag them with Mary Shelley May, because I would really like to see what other people are reading and how other people are thinking about these prompts. Then I've also got a trillion other books I'd like to read. So let's have a look at those. Of course, for Read Harder, for the independently published book by a BIPOC author, I think I'm going to be reading A Stranger in Olandria. This is about, I have my notes in front of me, this is about Jevik, the pepper merchant's son. He's been raised on stories of Olandria, a distant land where books are as common as they are rare in his home. When his father dies and Jevik takes his place on the yearly selling trip to Olandria, Jevik's life is as close to perfect as he can imagine. But just as he revels in Olandria's Rabelaisian feast of birds, he is pulled drastically off course and becomes haunted by the ghost of an illiterate girl. In desperation, Jevik seeks the aid of Olandrian priests and quickly becomes a pawn in the struggle between the Empire's two most powerful cults. Yet even as the country shimmers on the cusp of war, he must face his ghost and learn her story before he has any chance of becoming free by setting her free. An ordeal that challenges his understanding of art and life, home and exile, and the limits of that seductive necromancy, reading being the seductive necromancy. She's chewing a chair, so I'm going to be right back. So that one sounds fascinating to me, and I don't know if I'll get along with the writing style or anything. I don't know, but the story itself sounds wild and exciting. The next Read Harder prompt is cover pick. I actually picked something different. I picked a middle grade book earlier in the year when I was anticipating what I might try to read so I could track down copies of them. But then I changed it at the last minute because of this cover here. This is Artfully Yours. And it says, Nina Finch isn't suited for a life of crime. Raised by her art forger brother, she can paint like Botticelli, but she'd much rather be baking gooseberry tarts. She finally has the money she needs to open her own bakery. Unfortunately, her brother's carelessness lands her and their forgeries directly under the nose of London's most discerning art critic, Alan D'Ath. D-E apostrophe A-T-H. D'Ath. D'Ath knows the paintings are fake. He doesn't know that Nina had a hand in their creation. In fact, he offers her a job in his household. Accepting it, the job, is the most dangerous thing she has ever done. So that sounds fun. Then I've had this one poking around on Audible for years, a couple of years at least, and I've never listened to it. So that is The Wife in the Attic. The Wife in the Attic. I think it's a Jane Eyre retelling. Then I would like to reread, really, but I haven't read it in so many years, The Luckiest Girl by Beverly Cleary. I don't know, May just feels like the time to do this. This is about a girl in the 1950s who asks her parents if she can go spend a year living at a friend's house in California, and they agree. And how she goes there and experiences a totally different, basically, culture from what she's used to, and falls in love and just all sorts of stuff. So I'm excited to reread that. I haven't read it since I was a teenager. Then my Facebook friend picked The Great Alone for me to read for the 12 in 12. This is by Kristen Hanna. No, I've never read it. I think I'm in for a treat. I know my sister really likes this book. I really don't know much about it. I really don't want to know much about it. I know Kristen Hanna will make me cry most likely, but I'm there for it. So I'll be reading this. Every book I've read, picked by my Facebook friends, has been amazing. So I have no doubts here. And then my Instagram friends picked The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell for the 12 in 12 challenge. Now, spoiler alert, April's pick was a DNF. More about that in my wrap up if you want to watch it. So it's not going as well on Instagram as it is on Facebook among my friends, but that's okay. The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell is by the author of Hamnet and other things. But if you know that name and you don't know where to place it, probably because it is the author of Hamnet. I did read Hamnet last year, or maybe earlier this year. No, definitely last year. I did read Hamnet last year and did enjoy it. Thought it was absolutely beautiful, heartbreaking, also a little bit slow. And this one is quite a lot longer than Hamnet, I believe. I will be reading it, I will be listening to it on audio, but I do think it's quite a bit longer. And I don't know if her writing style, as beautiful as it is, can sustain my attention for that long. So we will have to see. I probably would not pick this up if this friend had not recommended it. So thanks to this friend, maybe it will be a favorite. We'll see. We'll see. I think it's about Lucretia Borgia. Then my book of the month pick, I'm very excited. I've been reading so many, and loving, but still reading so many dark books from book of the month. I went with something pink and fun called Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. I've never read anything by Curtis Sittenfeld, but I'm really excited to read this. I've heard a lot of praise for Rodham by this, a fictionalized account of Hillary Rodham Clinton, but I've never read it. And I think that this author writes very satisfying social commentary, humor kind of books. And I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Romantic comedy sounds fun. Like I do with almost all of my book of the month books, I didn't really read much of the synopsis. Have given good reviews. I paused there only because the writing retreat I did not actually give good review to, but then it ended up becoming one of my favorite reads of that month. So I am having a great time with book of the month, and everything I have read, even if I don't think it's a well-written, quote-unquote, book, it's been a great experience. So I think that romantic comedy will be the same. I am going to read this book, which releases June 13th on my Kindle. This is an arc called The Happy Life of Isadora Bentley. And it says, Isadora is out to prove that there is no such thing as choosing happiness. She follows the rules, she likes things just so, and she believes that happiness is something that flat out doesn't exist and never will. But on her 30th birthday, Isadora does something completely out of character. The woman who never does anything on a whim makes an impulse purchase of a magazine featuring a silly article detailing 31 ways to be happy, which includes everything from smiling at strangers to exercising for endorphins to giving in to chocolate cravings. Isadora decides to create her own secret research project, proving the writer of the ridiculous piece wrong. I think we can all see where this is going. She's going to be proven wrong. It's going to be feel good. It's going to be fun. Again, it comes out on June 13th. I'm so excited about this one. I'm going to be rereading my favorite Shakespeare of all time, Titus Andronicus. It is so messed up. It is so messed up. It is a messed up Roman history play. And I love it. If you're not familiar with the synopsis, I'm not going to share it here. It's dark. It's dark. Have fun looking it up. I will put a link to a little, I don't remember. I'll have to find it again. It's either the Globe or Royal Shakespeare Company. I think it's Royal Shakespeare Company or Folgers have a little cartoon. I think it's less than a minute long summary of it. And I will put that down. I'll put the link to that down in the box below if you would like to know what Titus Andronicus is about. But I'm very excited. I've only read it once. It shot to the top of my favorites, beating out the likes of Macbeth and Hamlet, which were my previous favorites. And I'm excited to reread it with my group of Shakespeare readers. Then I've got this gorgeous arc. Look how beautiful that cover is going to be. This is called Cities of Women by Kathleen B. Jones. This is releasing on September 5th. So actually, if I want to wait a little bit, I can. Also with the other one, but they're both really, both of these arcs appeal to me quite a lot right now. And so I would like to read them. But this one says, in the 21st century, we meet Verity Fraser, a disillusioned history professor who sets out to prove that the artists responsible for the illuminated artwork in Christine de Pizan's medieval manuscripts was a remarkable woman named Anastasia. As Anastasia's story unfolds against the exquisitely rendered medieval backdrop of moral disaster, political intrigue, and extraordinary creativity, Verity finds her career on the brink of collapse by her efforts to uncover evidence of the lost artist's existence. Inspired by a decade of research, Jones has woven together a luminous and incisive masterpiece of historical fiction, evoking spare joys and monumental pitfalls facing medieval women artists and a contemporary woman who becomes obsessed with medieval books. Sounds fun. Sounds fun. It's literary, so it'll take me a little bit longer, but and it may not end happily, but it sounds fun. And then I have this arc, which comes out May 23rd. So I'm definitely reading this month. And that is The Shakespeare Sisters. This is about 3 sisters, I think World War II. I know one of the girls is named Rosalind. I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going on with this, but it's got a cute cover and it's about Shakespeare's sisters. I don't know. But I do know it takes place during World War II, not in the Elizabethan time. And then I have another arc. This one comes out August 15th, so if I need to wait on it a little bit, I can, but I'm really interested in reading it now. And that is An American Immigrant by Joanna Roya Vaughn, a Colombian-American journalist, tries to save her career by taking an assignment somewhere she never thought she would go, Colombia. And in this heartwarming debut novel about rediscovering our family stories, 25-year-old Melanie Carvajal, a hard-working but struggling journalist for a Miami newspaper, loves her Colombian mother but regularly ignores her phone calls. Frustrated that she never quite takes the time to understand Melanie's life, when the opportunity arises for a big assignment that might save her flagging career, Honey, that's enough. Melanie follows the story to the land of her mother's birth, and she soon realizes Colombia has the potential to connect her, after all these years, to something she's long ignored, her heritage. That sounds great. It sounds great. And then I also got this one by Darcy Coates. This is Dead of Winter, and I am going to read this, and it's going to be super fast. Darcy Coates books take me a couple hours. Please know, though, if you're excited about this one, this is actually a straight up locked room mystery. This is not a haunted house story. Darcy Coates is kind of the writer of haunted houses at this time in our lives. And this is not a haunted house story. In fact, I don't think it's horror at all. I think that it is just a complete, straightforward, locked room mystery. So if that intrigues you, coming from Darcy Coates, keep your eye out for it. It's coming July 11th. And also, I will definitely be reading this one this month. So I'll let you know. If you want to know my thoughts about it, Goodreads and Instagram, that's where you go. Then there's this one, which I don't know if it will come in. I've got its pre-order hold. It hasn't been released yet, but I can already put a hold on it at the library. So I have a hold on it. I don't know what number I am in line for that hold. I don't know how popular this book is going to be, but two of my favorite romance reads are by a woman named Sarah Strohmeyer. And she wrote The Cinderella Pact and The Sleeping Beauty. But she wrote these 2 books, and I love them. I absolutely love them. They are so fun and so feel good. Cinderella Pact was made into a Lifetime movie. Like, it's really, really uplifting, fun fiction. I'm just trying to think of what The Sleeping Beauty one is. It won't come to me. It's okay. I saw that she had a new book coming out. And it is she has a whole series of books that I've never read, and she has several other standalones, one of which I read last year and didn't really like all that much. It was fine, but it wasn't that great. It wasn't like The Cinderella Pact or The Sleeping Beauty. I have to look it up. Proposal. The Sleeping Beauty Proposal. So it wasn't like either of those 2 books, but it wasn't bad. It was fine. It was The Penny Pinchers Club was the one that I read. So she's got a lot of books that I haven't read. But I saw that she had this new one coming out. It's called We Love to Entertain, and it's a thriller. It's so different from what I thought she wrote. Maybe she writes other thrillers. I know she's written some YA stuff that kind of maybe is on the cusp of a thriller. I thought she was just mainly a romance author, and now I see that she's got this thriller coming out, and I do really like her writing style. So I am so curious about this. If my hold from the library comes in, I will definitely be reading this book, but like I said, I don't know where I stand in the waiting, and it's being released, I think, late April, April 24th. So we'll see how that goes. Then I also am going to read this for the very first time. This is The Railway Children by E. Nesbit. Now, growing up, I had a teacher who read to us several books in a series called The Boxcar Children. And my whole life until 2016, when I went to Yorkshire, my whole life, I thought that The Railway Children and The Boxcar Children were the same series. Turns out The Railway Children has absolutely nothing to do with that and is not a series. By totally different author, totally different story, totally different time period, totally different. So I am going to read this finally. I'm finally going to read this for myself and know the difference between The Boxcar Children and The Railway Children. And then I see that I can actually stream the fairly recent BBC version of The Railway Children, which was filmed on part of the railway using, I think, the steam trains. And I took a steam train to get to Haworth. And so I think that along that line, somehow that's connected to the filming of this BBC series about this book, because in 2016, which I think may have been when it was filmed or something close to that, there were advertisements for it everywhere while I was there. So I've been, since 2016, on the back burner of my mind, planning to read The Railway Children, and the day has finally come. Then I would really like to reread. I'm going to start this series. So I've been reading series all year, and as I finish them, I replace them with something else, with another series. So I'm about to start the Austen Family series by Madeleine L'Engle. I've read this whole series before. This will be a reread. Every book in this series will be a reread. I don't know that I've ever read them in chronological order, though. So I'm excited to do that, like chronological for the family's life. So I'm excited to do that. Everybody knows Madeleine L'Engle from A Wrinkle in Time. A Wrinkle in Time is great. This Austen Family series is nothing like that. The first book is about a young family member who comes to live with the Austens for a little bit because her father has died in a car accident. And they have to, I think her name is Maggie? Yeah, her name is Maggie. And the closest in age to her is the main Austen that almost all of the books revolve around, Victoria Austen. And all the short stories I wrote in my middle school years featured a girl named Vicky because of Vicky Austen. These books are so wonderful. They're so wonderful. Later books in the series do touch on some of the science fiction aspects that really intrigued Madeleine L'Engle as a writer and as a Christian. But this one is just slice of life. I think it's the 1950s or the 1960s family taking in a troubled girl. They don't know she's troubled, and they know she's lost a parent, but they don't know that she's got some other stuff going on. And they treat her with a lot of sympathy and empathy, and she treats them pretty poorly. pretty poorly. And so it's the story of how this family's love help her kind of grow into a better version of herself. That's just the first volume. So I'm really excited to reread that. If you can't tell, I love them. I love these books. I don't know how many times I've read Meet the Austins, probably 3 or 4, not an excessive amount. Other books in the series definitely have read more, but excited to start this series. I'm speaking of series, I will be reading The Fiery Cross, which is the next book in the Outlander series. Not tired of Outlander yet. Yeah, I think I might see this series through. It's so long, but I think I might see it through all the way to the end, and I didn't know. I didn't say that out loud, but I had my doubts. They're so long, these books, but they read so quickly. And then right now I'm having fun reading the book and then watching the season of the show that, as we get further into the show, less and less corresponds to the actual books. Sometimes I like that. Like there's one character who's killed fairly early off in the book version, but is still alive multiple seasons after his book death in the TV version, and he's one of my favorite people. So yeah, it's a fun series. It's definitely a controversial series. Some people today really don't like the way that it accurately depicts the way women were treated at the time. Definitely some stuff in there that is trigger warning-ish. Definitely some things that I just kind of skip over or don't pay so much attention to, in favor of reading the really fun stories. And fun is an interesting word to use there. Some of these storylines are heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. But the way that Gabaldon plays with time, and now she has all these added layers of forwards and backwards and characters just popping up all over the place. It's getting so complicated, and I love it. I love it. I had this feeling when I first started that I might get a little bit bored. How much could she do? Why was the series so long and each volume so long? And now I understand. Now I understand. I don't know quite what I'm going to do when I get to that last book, knowing that she hasn't finished the next book yet. But speaking of that possibility, I will also be reading the next book in the Arcana series by Kresley Cole. This is Arcana Rising, and the final book for this series, which we've been waiting for since 2017, I think. It's been a long time. It's finally released. It's real. It exists. So if I can survive, so I'm rereading. This is why I'm rereading the Arcana series. It's fun. It's a fun series. It's a YA dystopian series with tarot arcana come to life kind of and fighting these battles through these human bodies. Well, mostly human bodies, and death incarnate, and bagmen, which are like the implication there, or what you're supposed to infer there, is that it's just like a body bag that moves around. It's like a zombie kind of, but they do a lot of exploding, these bagmen. Anyway, it's super fun. It's a super fun series. And the final book has finally been released, which is why I've been rereading all these Arcana books, because I haven't read them since, I think, 2017. I've got 2 friends who, the friends that got me started on the series in the first place, because it's not necessarily something I would normally pick up on my own, are so excited too. So we're very, very pleased. We're all adult women. All teachers, all adult women. So pleased that this YA fantasy dystopian series is finally coming to a close. So I'll be rereading Arcana. And then I will be finishing this series as well. This is the Harold Fry series. These are all companion novels. They're not, you can read each one as a standalone, but to get the complete story, you read all 3. Harold Fry comes first, Queenie Hennessy comes second, and Maureen comes third. Maureen is a new release. This just came out, I think, last month or the month before. And this is a short, sweet little volume. It's from the perspective of the wife. And the wife is the one that I really can't stand, but it is a credit to Rachel Joyce that I really want to hear her story. Can't stand this woman. Really want to hear her story. So yeah, excited to finish that one up. And then I'm going to be starting another new series, The Seven Sisters. So this is the first book in the Seven Sisters series by Lucinda Riley. I am aware that the last book in the series was not finished by Lucinda Riley because she passed away and her son finishes it, which just is part of my intrigue for this series. I really want to get through it. I hope that I love it. I think that I will. Here is a basic, I'm just going to read you the back because I really don't know a ton about it, but I know that there are several people who I trust as readers who really enjoy this series. So this says, gathered at their childhood home on Lake Geneva to mourn for their beloved adoptive father's death, Maya Diablis and her 5 younger sisters each receive a tantalizing clue to their true, distinct heritages. For Maya, the journey to piece together her past begins in a crumbling mansion in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Did I just say de Janeiro? Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. 80 years earlier, in the Rio of the 1920s, passionate Isabel Bonifacio longs to see the world before she is married off to an aristocratic stranger. She convinces her father to allow her to accompany Heitor, I think it's Heitor, not sure, de Silva Costa and his family to Europe as the architect searches for an artist to bring to life his vision for an enormous statue to be called Christ the Redeemer. We know this statue. It's a real world statue. But in Paris, Isabel meets an ambitious young sculptor and knows at once that her life will never be the same. In this beguiling, entrancing novel, Lucinda Riley vividly intertwines the stories of 2 extraordinary women set decades apart, each a reminder of the courage it takes to accept love when it is offered. We all know I love a dual timeline. I think this is going to be a great series, and that's as much as I know about the series. That each book is kind of a standalone because each book is about a different sister, but again, interwoven the greater whole. Then I would like to read this tiny little volume called Be My Guest by Priya Basil. This one says, when we gather around the dinner table among family or friends, we do more than just share a meal. The table is where the best conversations take place. On the day's events or the world's events, on religion and politics, immigration and culture, on love and cooking. In the same way, Be My Guest is a conversation about all of those things, mediated through the sharing of food. Here, Priya Basil explores what it means to tend to others and to ourselves, and how the two things work hand in hand. And she shows how food and the act of offering food is used to express love and support, weaving together stories from her own life with the knowledge gleaned from her Sikh heritage, her years spent in Kenya, India, Great Britain, and Germany, and ideas from Derrida, Plato, Arndt, and Peter Singer. Basil focuses an unexpected and illuminating light on what it means to be both a host and a guest. I think that sounds like a delightful, uplifting, thought-provoking little piece of nonfiction that I would like to read. I've also got this on my Kindle, The Divine Lola. Lola. Hi, Lola. Did I say your name? I so said your name, didn't I? She's chewing on that bone and then she stopped. I was like, what? So The Divine L. And this is about Lola Montanez, who became a performer, and she has some kind of relationship with Ludwig, the King of Bavaria. I think the man, I could be getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's the guy who built these castles, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee, Neuschwanstein. And when I was a child, my family went and visited these castles. And I have always been so fascinated by King Ludwig of Bavaria because of that trip that my family took when I was young. And I think that this is about that king. It's nonfiction. And I think it's about that king and how this woman is somehow influential in his life or something. I don't know. But I am excited to find out about that one. I'd also like to read How to Create the Perfect Wife. You can see that I have read quite a bit of it before, but I've not finished it. And it has been on multiple TBRs. Jane Austen July, it pops up. When I was reading Charles Dickens, I kept trying to get it to pop up. I think I even might have had it on my Mary Shelley May TBR last year. Summer 1769, an eccentric English gentleman embarks on an extraordinary social experiment. The experiment begins when the wealthy Thomas Day walks into a foundling hospital, not a foundling hospital, the foundling hospital, and selects a young girl. Returning to London, he chooses a second girl from the charity's headquarters. After changing their names, Day takes the two orphans to France. Now 12-year-old Anne and 11-year-old Dorcas are entirely under his command. At 21, Day knows exactly the kind of woman he wants for his bride. Pure, tough and hardy, willing to live in rural seclusion and attend to his every whim. Yet, despite inheriting a sizable fortune, Day has failed to find a girl who meets these requirements. Under the scrutiny of his circle of learned friends, Day sets out to raise the perfect wife. This is a true story. I am hoping this backfires on these men because I know from reading the bit that I've already read, I know that there are a couple of people involved in figuring out the philosophy behind the raising of these girls. These girls are not mistreated, but they are being raised with the intent of creating this perfect, obedient, subservient, intelligent, but not independent woman of his dreams. It's just not okay. So this really happened, and I want to know what happened to these girls, but for whatever reason, I got distracted and didn't finish reading it, and I'm finally going to pick it back up. And then finally, believe it or not, finally, under the influence of Kate Howe from Kate Howe on YouTube, or No Compliments to Your Mother on Instagram, Bookstagram, and the many times that she has talked about this book. I saw it on Better World Books when I was looking for The Last Man. I don't ask me how that happened, but when I was looking for The Last Man, I saw that they had a copy of this, and it wasn't not. I said I never spend more than $6. This was $7.95, but still $7.95. Okay, wait until I open this up if you don't know what this is. This is Maud, the illustrated diary of a Victorian woman, adapted by Flora Fraser with an introduction by Elizabeth Longford. And what this is a real Victorian woman's journals. But they're not just journals. She painted her journals. So think Diary of an Edwardian lady, but this is Diary of a Victorian lady. And when you open it up, first you get a little background into her family with some real photographs and stuff. So you get the context. So many great photographs in here. So much great context. You get the players, the cast. So these are all of the people. These are real images of the people that she's going to draw and refer to in her journal. And then you get the journals. So these are her words, her entries, and then she's got all of these amazing illustrations that she did herself. And I am so excited to dive into the perspective of a real Victorian woman writing in Victorian times about Victorian life as if it's just normal. Because it was. So I'm super excited about it. And I don't think that I will be able to finish it. You saw how much text there is in there. I don't think I'll be able to finish it in 1 month. I think this is a process for me, but I would definitely like to start diving into it in the month of May. And that, my friends, believe it or not, are all the books I want to read in the month of May. So many books, so many books. a healthy amount of books. The more books, it's a happy problem to have, but if any of these looked of interest to you, check my Bookstagram to see what I actually read and what I actually finished. Can you believe it's May? Happy May. And as usual, I have finished this and I'm ready to wrap it up and say, hey, let's go read. And one more spin around the room here because Lola the Wonder Hound has finally relaxed. You can see I've caged the books so that they're safe. All right. On that note, take one more sip from the cup of spring. Remind you to please let me know if you are reading anything for Mary Shelley May, and also join me for the read of The Last Man. I think it's going to be interesting to read Mary Shelley's take on 21st century. Yeah, Mary Shelley May, lots of fun things to read. It's almost summer break, a couple more months. Let's go read.